She thought she could have a black man removed from first class with just a few carefully chosen words until he calmly reached into his pocket and revealed his FBI badge. Patricia Langford strolled through Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, her designer carry-on gliding smoothly behind her. She had taken this flight route countless times before, Dallas to Washington, D.C., first class, the only way she ever traveled. Everything about air travel felt predictable to her. The priority, boarding, the complimentary champagne, the hushed conversations between professionals, she expected comfort and exclusivity. So when she approached her row and saw a black man in a crisp navy blue suit already seated beside her, her steps faltered. He had an air of quiet confidence, his laptop open, eyes scanning the screen as if he were reviewing something important. Patricia's lips pressed together. She set her designer tote down with a little too much force and took her seat, barely masking her displeasure. First class was not supposed to be like this. The man beside her, Daniel Stokes, barely acknowledged her. He was focused, typing effortlessly, absorbed in his work. The glow from his laptop reflected against his dark skin, highlighting the sharp angles of his face. He had the composure of someone who belonged there. Patricia, however, was not convinced. She inhaled sharply through her nose, shifting in her seat. Her purse accidentally nudged his armrest, no reaction. She sat up straighter, glancing around as if expecting a flight attendant to notice this mistake. Then she took it a step further. She leaned slightly toward him, just enough to make her presence known. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carefully polite. "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" Daniel did not even look up. "Yes," he replied. That was it. No elaboration, no explanation. She cleared her throat, glancing around again. This time, she caught the eye of a flight attendant, Emily Jacobs, a young woman in her early 30s who had been assisting passengers a few rows ahead. Patricia lifted her hand slightly, signaling Emily over. Daniel sighed, subtle but noticeable. Emily approached with her usual professional smile. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" Patricia forced a small chuckle, shaking her head as if she found the situation amusing. "I think there's been a little mix-up. I believe this gentleman is in the wrong seat." Emily glanced at Daniel, who finally paused his typing and looked up. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes. Not surprise, not confusion, something else. Emily pulled out the passenger manifest from her tablet, quickly scanning the seat assignments. "Actually, Mr. Stokes is in his correct seat," she said politely. "Your ticket says 2A and he is in 2B. Patricia blinked, her fingers tightening around the edge of her armrest. "That is odd," she said, forcing a laugh. "Are you sure?" I just assumed," Emily smiled, already sensing where this was going. "I am sure, ma'am. Everything looks correct." Patricia's face twitched. Her carefully controlled expression wavered for a fraction of a second before she smoothed it over with a tight-lipped smile. "Well," she exhaled, "I suppose mistakes happen." She turned back toward the window, but she was not done, not even close. Daniel, meanwhile, had already gone back to work. Emily hesitated for a second, sensing the tension, then gave Daniel a quick nod before stepping away. But Patricia was stewing. Her fingers tapped against her knee, her breath shallow, eyes darting toward the flight crew, then back to Daniel. He was not reacting. He was not explaining himself or offering any reassurances. He was not playing into the little game she had expected him to play. That made her angrier. She was not the kind of woman to let things slide, and Patricia was not the type to suffer in silence. She decided to take action. Sitting stiffly, arms crossed over her chest, her mind raced. This was not right. She had flown first class for decades, and never, not once, had she been put in a situation like this. The man beside her was not doing anything wrong, but that did not matter to her. He did not belong. Her breath came faster, her irritation bubbling just beneath the surface. She could not just sit there and accept this. She pressed the call button. A soft chime sounded overhead. and Emily Jacobs reappeared a few moments later. Her smile the same as before, professional and warm. "Ma'am, is there something I can help you with?" Patricia kept her voice low, her tone carefully measured. "I would like to request a seat change." Emily blinked. "Oh, are you uncomfortable? Is there an issue with the seat itself?" Patricia hesitated for half a second. She could not just say what she was really thinking. Instead, she tilted her head toward Daniel, lowering her voice even further. I do not feel comfortable sitting here," she said, her words slow and deliberate. Emily's smile faltered. "I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am. If there is a technical issue with the seat, I would be happy to—" "No, it is not the seat," Patricia interrupted. "It is—" She exhaled sharply. "I just prefer to sit elsewhere." Emily glanced at Daniel, who had paused his typing again but had not said a word. He was listening, waiting, his fingers hovering over the keyboard, his jaw tight. "Let me check if there are any open seats," Emily said, tapping her tablet. "Just a moment." Patricia sat back, lips pressed into a firm line. Daniel did not react. He did not argue, did not acknowledge her, did not ask her why she was uncomfortable. That only infuriated her more. A few rows ahead, a man in a blazer turned his head slightly, pretending to check his phone but clearly listening. Across the aisle, a woman nudged her husband. People were noticing. Emily's fingers moved quickly over the screen. "I am afraid we are at full capacity today, ma'am. There are not any open first-class seats available." Patricia's stomach clenched. Emily smiled apologetically. "Would you like me to check in economy? There might be a seat available there." Patricia's face burned. Economy? As if she would ever— Her voice caught in her throat. "That is not going to work." Emily's smile did not waver. "In that case, I hope you do not mind staying in your assigned seat." Patricia forced a thin-lipped smile. "I suppose I have no choice." Emily nodded. "Let me know if you need anything else." She walked away, but Patricia barely noticed. Her ears were ringing. Daniel, still silent, turned back to his laptop and resumed typing. That was it. That was his response. He was just going to pretend she did not exist. Her fingers curled into fists. This was not over. She exhaled sharply and pressed the call button again. This time, Emily hesitated before coming back. "Ma'am?" Patricia sat up straighter. "I need to speak to someone in charge." Emily's face remained neutral. "I am the lead flight attendant on this flight. Is there something I can clarify for you?" Patricia's voice sharpened. "I need to speak to the head crew member." "Or the pilot." A murmur spread through the cabin. Someone let out a quiet chuckle. Emily's expression remained professional, but her patience was clearly thinning. "Ma'am, the pilot is preparing for takeoff and will not be available, but I am happy to assist you." Patricia pursed her lips, her jaw tightening. Daniel was not reacting. He was not nervous, was not shifting in discomfort. It was as if he had done this dance before. She lowered her voice again. "I do not feel safe." That changed everything. Emily's smile dropped, her body stiffened. Daniel stopped typing. Across the aisle, a middle-aged man wearing a Bluetooth earpiece muttered, "Here we go again." Emily straightened up. "I am sorry, ma'am, but can you clarify what you mean?" Patricia folded her hands neatly in her lap, tilting her head slightly. "I just do not feel comfortable. She hesitated just long enough to imply something without saying it outright. "I do not want to be difficult, but I think it would be best if someone else took this seat." Daniel closed his laptop. This time he looked her directly in the eye, and for the first time, Patricia felt a flicker of uncertainty. But Patricia was not letting this go, and now she was getting louder. A hush settled over the cabin, the weight of Patricia's words hanging in the air. "I do not feel safe." The phrase carried power. It was not loud, but it did not need to be. It was carefully chosen, designed to trigger a response. Emily, still standing beside her, did not move right away. Her posture stiffened, and her eyes darted toward Daniel, who had now fully closed his laptop, hands resting on top of it. He was not smiling. He was not frowning. He just stared at Patricia, studying her. Patricia did not waver. Not yet. Emily exhaled slowly. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "are you saying you feel threatened?" Patricia tilted her head slightly, giving the smallest shrug. "I am not saying that. I just do not feel comfortable. That is all." Across the aisle, the businessman with the Bluetooth scoffed and muttered, "Unbelievable." A young woman 3 rows back lifted her phone slightly, pretending to text but clearly recording. A few other passengers whispered among themselves, heads turning in Patricia's direction. Patricia noticed. She could feel the shift. The tide was turning against her, but she was not about to back down. "This is a simple request," she continued, feigning politeness. "I am just asking to be accommodated. If I am uncomfortable, I should have the right to move seats, should I not?" Emily's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, I already checked, and there are no open first-class seats available." Patricia pressed her lips together. "And coach?" Emily hesitated. "There are 2 open seats in economy." Patricia straightened. "Perfect. He can take one of them." A low ripple of murmurs spread through the cabin. Daniel inhaled deeply, his fingers drumming once on the surface of his laptop before going, "Still." He was not arguing, was not responding, but he also was not moving. Emily blinked, as if replaying Patricia's words in her mind to make sure she heard correctly. "Ma'am." Her voice was lower now, firmer. "Just to clarify, you want me to move this passenger to economy because you do not want to sit next to him?" Patricia nodded once, sitting straighter. "Yes." Emily inhaled through her nose. "That will not be happening." Patricia's eyes snapped up. "Excuse me?" Emily folded her hands in front of her, voice unwavering. "Mr. Stokes has a first-class ticket just like you. He is in his assigned seat. I cannot, and will not, ask him to move." Patricia's face flushed. She was losing control of the situation. Passengers were staring openly now, some whispering, some shaking their heads. The young woman with the phone was still recording. Patricia felt her stomach twist. "This is ridiculous," she hissed. "I am simply asking for the same courtesy that would be extended to anyone else who feels uncomfortable." Emily did not budge. "You are asking me to remove a paying passenger from his assigned first-class seat and relocate him to economy for no valid reason. That is not an accommodation. That is discrimination." A sharp silence followed. Someone let out a low whistle. Daniel had not moved, had not said a word. He just watched Patricia, waiting. Patricia's pulse pounded in her ears. This was not how it was supposed to go. Emily squared her shoulders. "Ma'am, we are about to taxi. If you cannot remain seated and follow flight crew instructions, I will have to ask you to deplane." Patricia's stomach dropped. "What?" Emily's tone remained professional but firm. "You have 2 options. Stay in your seat quietly, or you can deplane. But Mr. Stokes is not moving." A few passengers clapped softly. Patricia felt humiliation rise in her chest. This was not how things were supposed to work. She was not supposed to be the one getting reprimanded. She opened her mouth, ready to argue, but before she could, Daniel reached into his pocket. He pulled out a leather case, flipped it open, and held it up. And just like that, everything changed. A gold FBI badge gleamed under the cabin lights. The air in the plane shifted. Patricia's entire body went rigid. Passengers gasped, a few even chuckled. The young woman recording zoomed in immediately. Daniel's voice was calm, even unreadable. "Ma'am," he said smoothly, tilting his head, "would you like to file an official complaint? I can take your statement right now." Patricia's breath hitched. She could not speak. Daniel did not move, did not blink. He just waited. And for the first time, Patricia felt truly trapped. But Patricia was not just embarrassed. She was about to face real consequences. The silence in the cabin was thick, stretching uncomfortably between Patricia and Daniel. His FBI badge glinted. Under the overhead lights, the gold emblem unmistakable. It was the kind of thing you could not unsee, the kind of revelation that shifted the entire room. Passengers who had been whispering moments ago were now staring openly, some smirking, others wide-eyed. Patricia's mouth went dry. Her brain scrambled for an explanation, an excuse, a way out. This was not supposed to happen. The man she had tried to have removed from the plane, the man she had implied was a threat, was federal law enforcement. Her throat tightened. Daniel's expression had not changed. He was not smiling or gloating. He just sat there, badge in one hand, eyes locked onto hers, waiting. His voice was steady, level, unreadable. "Would you like to file an official complaint, ma'am?" The words hung in the air like a loaded gun. Patricia's body felt frozen, heat.